Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. Could county cricketers go on strike next summer? Well, it's not a complete impossibility. Today we hear from PCA Chair and Warwickshire seamer Oliver Hannon-Dalby about the issue. We also hear from one of the greats of English cricket, Joe Root, about how Brendon McCullum has changed the way he looks at batting. And as the English summer finally draws to a close, we review the county championship and look at that extraordinary relegation dogfight that resulted in Durham joining Worcestershire in Division 2 next summer. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Lawrence Booth and Phil Walker. First of all, great to see so many of you at the live show on Wednesday. Phil, I reckon that was the best live show we've done.
Why?
In terms of how much fun everyone seemed to have.
Yeah, I'd say so. And your timekeeping was exceptional, I have to say. 9:30, bang on. Lights out and away you go. It was a good one. It was a real good one. Bigger next time, please.
Yes,
I
it
reckon
will be bigger next time.
We could definitely sell out a slightly bigger pub, I would say. I don't want to go overboard, but I reckon a slightly bigger pub, we could even pull that one off.
It was predominantly our Patreon audience there. They had first dibs on tickets. If you want to get on the Patreon, by the way, £5 a month plus VAT, you get our weekly extra shows and all our daily episodes immediately after every England men's and women's international. So in the month of October, that is an additional 18 episodes alone. And if you want even more than that, you can get the ad-free episodes of the weekly shows for £3 extra. And every tier has access to our wonderful Discord community as well. On to the championship. Nottinghamshire are winners of the county championship for the first time in 15 years. Skipper Haseeb Hameed scored a first innings 100, his fourth of the summer, before Carl Verreynne and Liam Patterson-White both passed 50, getting Notts past the 350 mark to get the bonus point required to secure the title. Lawrence, there are lots of individual stories we can get into. There's Peter Moores winning the championship with his third county and winning the championship in 3 different decades with 3 different teams as well. Mohammed Abbas spearheading the attack so well after the horrific personal win to losing both his brother and sister. But Haseeb Hameed, he's had an extraordinary career. He's packed a lot in for someone who's still just 28, and for him to be the captain and the guy who scored the most runs is a cool story.
It is a cool story. I still remember that tour of India 2016-17 when he was the bright young thing and looked superb. I mean, I the following year's Wisden editor's notes, I took a bit of a punt actually and said that he looked like a 10,000 test run man, and this still gets held against me by people who think I made an absolute boo-boo there. His test career may well be over. That's unless the coaching and captaincy changes and they decide that Zach Crawley they're not going to stick with Zach Crawley, Hameed may not play for England again, but at least he's finding some kind of fulfilment at county level. Didn't work out for him at Lancashire for various reasons, but he looks a serious player again, doesn't he? And that gives me hope. He may yet come again for England. You know, if he decides to bat into his late 30s, there is a chance, but they would have to change their policy. Great story, and delighted for him, as I am for Peter Moores, who of course had difficult times with England as well.
Phil, Hameed, it's a very, very special story.
Yeah, it's a beautiful one, really. And whatever happens from here on, he has had this moment of validation and probably some kind of catharsis for him as well. It must have been a deeply satisfying year, considering everything that he's gone through. Mentioning Peter Moores, they seem joined at the hip, those two. And I actually interviewed Moores on Haseeb a couple of years ago when he was about to be brought back into the England side, so maybe a few more years ago, But Moores had already got to work with him, and I was saying, well, what's different between the player that he had then, 3 or 4 years ago, and the player that he inherited as a sort of broken skin and bones from Lancashire after that horrifying year when he averaged literally single figures across the whole of a year. And he said it's all about flow and mindset with Haseeb, and he'd become so locked in his own way of doing things, the assumption that you had to bat in a certain way, and he'd become imprisoned by that idea, really. And what Moores tried to get him to do was just to break out of that, to try and embrace the inner stroke play that he'd had as a kid, as a teenager, when he was, as Lawrence said, he was a world beater. He was an untouchable under-19s player and an England Test player in the age, 20, 21?
As a teenager, I think. And,
he was actually 19,
and
right.
he The 10,000 run shout wasn't outlandish. The quotes from Virat Kohli at the time, who's the opposition captain, saying that this guy could dominate all formats. And 400s in the championship in 2016, 200s in a Roses game, 82 on Test debut. You can see why people were so excited. There's on the Moores Hasib relationship. There's a good story about one of the first nets that they had together. And Moores throws him a few balls, and there's one ball which Hamid blocks. And Moores says to him, I threw the exact same ball to Joe Root the other day. He hit that for 4. And then Hamid started playing with a bit more freedom.
Just that it was a hiding to nothing as well when he did come back into the England side. Summer of 2021. And played quite nicely as well. Made runs immediately when he came back into the side, albeit still with an echo of the past. And then opening the batting alongside Burns in that Ashes series, and that was a tough experience for everyone concerned. You know, there is that big black asterisk next to the series, and the more you talk to the people who are involved, the more you realise why. Not making excuses, but it was a tough place for him to come back into the side. Not yet sure of himself, and not yet probably fully developed. As you say, he's 28 years old. So there could yet be a third act. I wouldn't be surprised.
Lawrence, why is Peter Moores so successful as a domestic coach? Not just in terms of the trophies that he's won, but so many players speak so highly of him. People want to join Nottinghamshire partly because of his presence at the club.
He's an excellent man manager and one-to-one practitioner, so he'll get up early and go to the nets with you at 7 a.m. and work with you. The players love that personal attention. He's very good at turning average to good county players into excellent county players. Now, that attitude doesn't work at international level, unfortunately. The famous training session in Napier in 2008 when England lost a one-dayer and Moores had them out on the field again, and Michael Vaughan was appalled by this. And the players felt, they called him, Kevin Peterson, perhaps unfairly called him the woodpecker because he kept on at them. Now, he didn't make the transition, unfortunately, Moores sort of the mental transition, if you like, from being a good county coach to a good Test coach. That was essentially the problem. And he had 2 goes at it, so you can't say he wasn't given his chance. I would say with Moores, who is a lovely guy, a genuinely nice bloke who cares deeply about the game and his players, but he sometimes struggled to convey the message. If his press conferences were anything to go by, sometimes it came out a bit garbled. I'll try and be nice about this. You're thinking, if that's how he's communicating cricket to the public via the media, what is he saying in the dressing room to England players who know their game? They don't really need technical help. The last great technical England coach was Duncan Fletcher. That was a long time ago. Coaching has changed since then. So there were a couple of points there, but I think at county level where his personal touch is perfectly suited, then he's a world beater.
And obviously there are more high profile examples like Hamid, where they've gone from someone who's really struggling a few years ago to being arguably the best batter in the country this year. There are other stories of players who are less well known. So Ben Slater, for example, he's been around the county game for a long time. This season he scored 1,000 runs opening the batting in Division 1. Then you've got that homegrown group of players, Lyndon James, Liam Patterson-White, who've done really well for them this summer as well. Is this the start of a potential dynasty? Surrey won 3 in a row, and you finished this season, Notts have won 7 games. Surrey won 5. No one else won more than 4. Would you expect them to start 2026 as favourites too?
No. I would expect Surrey to win it next year. They will still start favourites, I think. It's been a great story, but county cricket is quite a precarious place, and you see this with teams that they can be dismantled quite quickly, and many people had Durham bothering the top of the league, including me, and they got relegated. That's the beauty of the top division of the county championship. It remains this kind of sweetly volatile sort of place. Notts really struggled the year before. And much of what's happened, I think, this year has been getting their champion fast bowler, Josh Tongue, available more than perhaps they were expecting. England allowing him to play in April and May, and he won them a couple of games, took a couple of fifers, and obviously then he came and did it in September at the Oval. But there are so many variables in the top division. Availability is always a challenge. Obviously, injuries are a challenge, and you're your game changers are your quicks, and you never quite know who's going to be on the park at any one time.
But I suppose that's why I asked the questions. I don't think their availability is going to really change next season. Ben Duckett played 1 game this year. Tongue only played 6. They were so strong in the bowling department that towards the end of the season, Ollie Stone went out on loan to Middlesex. At times, Brett Hutton wasn't playing. Their overseas recruitment was excellent. Mohammed Abbas and Ferguson Neal between them. If you use them as one bowler across the season, averaged pretty much 20. Carl Verena played a lot of cricket and did very well as well. They seem to me in a real sweet spot as well of having lots of players who are very good, but I don't think are going to change in terms of their international standing in the next year or so.
Yeah, I mean, Tongue might be an issue that England may look after him more. And as Phil said, he was pretty crucial for a couple of wins. In that Oval game, of course, the one that won them the title, he was the one who stood up at the end. I mean, if you take a guy out like him, so look at Essex with Sam Cook this season. Now, when I was asked for my predictions by the Daily Mail at the start of the summer, I said Essex. I went for Essex to win. I thought Surrey would come second because I just thought 4 wins in a row is tough by anyone's standards, however good they are. But I went for Essex to win because I just thought Cook and Porter, if they have an absolute blinder. But of course, he got taken out of the setup, and that cost Essex hugely, disproportionately, in fact. So I hear what you say. I think Notts have a bit more backup if they don't have Tongue. But as Phil says, it is incredibly volatile for sometimes reasons we don't fully understand.
Yeah, totally.
It's bizarre.
It's great, though, for that reason.
It is great. That's why Surrey are the outlier in a sense. So I do think Surrey will start as favourites, but Notts have got a good chance.
Yeah, I think it's the overseas recruitment that's particularly volatile. Notts, if you look at the contribution of their overseas players versus other teams, Surrey, for example, had 6 overseas players. Nathan Smith probably played the most, but no one had a huge impact on the season overall. Teams are really struggling. If you look at 11s, particularly in the second half of the season, almost more often than not, they're not fielding 2 overseas players, even in Division 1. So that is such a big part of constructing a side these days. And
just on that as well, and I don't really know where I stand, which isn't ideal for a podcast. But hey-ho. The leggy comes into Surrey's now, albeit it was kind of a dead game from their perspective. Obviously for Hampshire, it was desperately important. But even so, Surrey had booked in Chahar as a leggy. Takes 8 for 60 to win them the game. But it's his only game. May never play another game. And this bothers some people, right? And I can understand that idea that perhaps the integrity of the competition is slightly undermined if you are seemingly just running through your WhatsApps and you've got that lad's number, so you give him a ring, see if he's free next week. It does feel a little bit ad hoc and a bit messy. But then at the same time, you are also getting the chance to see these interesting cricketers who would otherwise not be able to commit at all to county cricket unless it happens to fit into their very packed schedules. And while it perhaps feels a bit dirty or a bit vulgar, you are also seeing a champion Indian leggy coming in right at the death.
yeah, I was going to get to
Perhaps
it.
there could be like a limit or a minimum number of games that you need to play across the course of a season, but then that becomes very difficult to administer. So I'm not really sure.
Well, 2 things on the Chahar story. So Surrey actually registered him before this game. So he was registered for the 3 games in September. They didn't make that public until before the Hampshire game. And 2, they would have signed Sai Kishore, who they had earlier on in the season, but he was injured. So in this specific case, I look at it and think, should a county be punished because their overseas players injured? Should they not be allowed to cover that? But I also get the optics of bringing a guy as good as Chahar in for 1 game, and obviously the consequences for Hampshire could have been enormous. And it's a bit like early in the season where Durham had 3 loanees
for 1 week.
For 1 week. That felt wrong, but equally when you looked at their injury list, you sort of understood it at the same time. So I sort of see it both ways. And I guess with the schedule being as it is, it feels very hard to legislate. And if you become a bit too hardline, the consequences could be that you have some very strange 11s taking the park. We mentioned the relegation battle there. Let me go through it because it was amazing. So Durham started the week in the relegation zone, but their route to end back in the same place was extraordinary. So they scored 346 in the first innings against Yorkshire to put themselves in a decent position of getting a win. Yorkshire themselves were in a bit of trouble if they were to lose that game. Yorkshire in response, bat and back, they scored 475 off 141 overs. So Durham in a bit of trouble again. Meanwhile, in Southampton, Surrey are effectively 20 for 5 against Hampshire. Hampshire can only go down if they lose that game and Durham don't lose. At that point, you'd put money on a draw at Headingley and a Hampshire win. Then two things happen. So one, Surrey start an almighty comeback. 17-year-old Ralphie Albert hits 63 from number 7 on first-class debut. He's snooker legend Jimmy White's grandson, by the way.
Do you think we'll say that for the next 10 years until he probably plays for England and then we can stop saying it? I don't want us to ever stop saying it.
So I think at the moment, given this was his first-class debut, a lot of people don't know who he is.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I think every time we mention him for the moment, I'm presuming there'll be a lot of people who don't know who he is. And for those people, they'll find it interesting. So we'll keep doing it for several years, I reckon.
Yeah, I reckon several years, yeah.
Anyway,
a decade or so.
He scores 63 from number 7.
I watched it, it's brilliant.
Leaves Hampshire chasing 181, and their chase is a disaster. Chahar takes 8 to leave Hampshire short by 20. Farcical scenes at the end of day 3, by the way. Hampshire need 33, Surrey need 1 wicket, and they're off a bad light with 2 bowlers, both bowling spin, unchanged for ages. People at the ground say they couldn't really see what was different from earlier on, and it was stumps at 4 o'clock or whatever. So Hampshire lose, and at this point, it looks like for all money, they're down. Durham, at this point, start their second innings against Yorkshire on the final day of the season, trailing by 129, secure the draw, and they're safe. There's less than a day to bat, and bad light is almost certainly going to come into it later on. But then Durham basically outdo Hampshire, collapsing to 85 all out. That includes a collapse of 28 for 8. Don Best and George Hill taking 8 wickets between them. What went wrong, Phil? You tipped them for the title. They're going to be... They might win it next year, but it'll be Div 2, not Div 1.
I certainly put them right up the top, yeah, as dark horses, at least. Well, the last day was agonising, and they went into their shell, into their bunker, thinking that would get it done. But modern cricket doesn't really allow for that, really. And I think they encouraged that implosion by the way that they approached it. They were 30-something for naught off 25 overs. And if you just play rope-a-dope cricket on the final day, then you are going to invite that kind of trouble.
England in the UAE in 2012, isn't it?
It's England at Adelaide in 06-07. That's how I always... Yeah, anyway, let's not talk about that, Lawrence.
Let's not.
No.
Twitching.
Yeah, they were unlucky. Loads of injuries early on. If they'd had anywhere near their first choice attack, or even their picking from their battery of quicks, or even allowing for Bryden Cast to not be playing and Mark Wood to be injured and so on, I still think they'd have been okay. But they were going into big games with Ben Rain as their only seamer of repute, and a couple of kids, in Hogg and Minto played a couple of games as well, and it just felt like they were bare bones in too many big games. They went to Surrey and got smashed because their attack was toothless. But if you looked at the squad at the start of the summer, then you'd never have predicted. Well, I famously didn't.
I think you're right. They lost their nerve on the last day. Now, Durham are the Bazball county. They made a big thing of that, and Ryan Campbell has encouraged them. And in fact, the day before the last game, I saw some quotes from him where he was saying, the way we play, they went completely into their bunker, invited Yorkshire through, as they were playing a game that came unnaturally to them. Now, McCullum and Stokes will tell you, if you change your style of play on the crucial day, it's going to cost you. You have to stick to what you do best. And because they weren't so far behind that runs were irrelevant. That was the other interesting thing. It wasn't just about time. Had they scored at 2.5, 3 and over, they'd have probably overtaken Yorkshire. And then it's the old runs count double business from about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So they lost their nerve. It's sad because I've always wanted Durham to do really well ever since they were the one county who took the Stokes, Key, McCullum ethos on seriously. They're like, all right, we'll give this a go. And it hasn't worked out, I think, the reasons Phil's outlined there with the bowling attack. And of course, you've got Wood, Stokes, Cass, Potts, kind of guys who aren't around as much as they might otherwise be. I mean, Potts played a bit, but averaged over 40 with the ball. So it's a shame, but I'd be surprised if they didn't bounce straight back up.
Yeah, I guess for me, I understand that losing those England guys is suboptimal. I don't have loads of sympathy, though, from a squad building perspective, because we knew Bryden Cast was going to play a lot. Matt Potts has played a lot of Test cricket recently. Ben Stokes never plays for Durham. Mark Wood very rarely plays for Durham. So and you look at their recruitment last year, I think this is one of the weird things about county recruitment, is that the recruitment happens during and actually quite early on the previous season. So if you take Surrey an example for 2026, let's say someone thinks they need to sign a spinner, they could do with another quick. Well, it's almost too late because all the contracts are done. And I wonder with Cast in particular, he was someone who established himself as a test match bowler and someone who's potentially quite central to England's plans over the winter. So perhaps there's some sympathy there. But you look at their squad building more generally, they recruited amazingly in the batting department, almost too well, so that a very established, proven county cricketer would be on the bench quite often. So in this season's case, Will Rhodes was often not playing. But they were so light in bowling, so light in bowling. And if you look at the 2 games they won, one was with that set of loanees, Cody Youssef as a short-term siding, Jake Ball and Blatherwick in from Lancs. And the other game they won was when they beat Notts, when Hamid scored a double hundred on the first day. And I think it's the one game this season that Cast plays.
But yeah, desperate. And again, it's perhaps a dull point, but it's absolutely key. When you look at this league, three teams finished on 172, and there was 1 point separating Hampshire and Durham. So all of those sort of dead games and rain-affected draws and scraps for bonus points on days 3 and 4 and whatnot that you don't necessarily keep your eye on, but they all, in the end, are critical. You know, this is a league of bonus points. That's how you win these things, really. And it was so tight, really. So tight at the bottom and in the middle.
Sussex finished on 172 points in 4th, 9 points off 3rd, but they could have gone down going into the last round of games. So amazing. I mean, on Sussex, by the way, amazing finish there. Chasing 63 against Worcestershire.
7 down?
7 down.
Yeah.
7 down. A reminder that we have collaborated with Hertfordshire-based brewery Mad Squirrel to revive the Wisden beer range, featuring firstly the Little Wonder, the nickname of John Wisden, which is a 4.7% pale ale bursting with tropical fruit, layered with aromatic herbs and anchored by a bold, weighty bitterness. The second beer in this short but sweet lineup is the Afternoon Session, which, as the name suggests, is the perfect choice for an easygoing cricketing afternoon. This 3.8% gluten-free pale ale is light, fruity, and effortlessly drinkable. You can head to Mad Squirrel's website to create your own custom packs of 6, 12, or 24 beers with free next day delivery. Find the link in the description below, and trust us, you won't be disappointed. And you can use the code WisdenAle10 to get 10% off. Right, before we pick our teams of the championship season and hear from Joe Root later in the show, there is increasingly a chance that players might take strike action over concerns over next year's schedule. After months of deliberation, the 2026 County Championship will be a 14-game competition, as it has been for most of the last decade. The PCA, the Players' Union, are not happy, saying that player welfare has not been prioritised. So let's hear from PCA Chair and Warwickshire Seamer Ollie Hannon-Dalby, who explains why it's not necessarily the volume of games players are unhappy with, and why it's actually the unreasonable turnaround times between games that they have a biggest issue with. Cool. So for the next bit of the show, we have the PCA Chair, Ollie Hannon-Dalby, with us. Ollie, cheers for joining the show. This week, it was confirmed that next season's County Championship is going to be 14 games long. And following the news, the PCA released a pretty bullish statement saying that player welfare is not being prioritised. The PCA were initially pushing for a 12-game season. Can you explain why the PCA opposes a 14-game championship season?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Appreciate you letting me come on. Essentially, we sort of do what the players ask for, and we've done various votes over the last few years, and particularly this year, some pretty stark stats came out about how the players feel about the championship. Now, we all love the game in this country. The English county cricket game is brilliantly sported. There are 18 teams. We want to protect it, but there's concern about how much cricket is being played and how close some of those fixtures are, particularly back to back. So if you're playing a 4-day game with anything less than 3 days rest, It can basically affect performance, and it can affect how good the game is that anyone is watching, but specifically can affect fast bowlers with injuries and stuff like that. So some of the stats that came out of pre-season this year was that 70% of cricketers thought that the current schedule was not conducive to high performance. 67% were worried about their mental health, and 83% of male cricketers were worried about their physical health. And they're just sort of stats we can't ignore, really. Obviously, there's people in those stats who are happy with the schedule, but it's a small number. And to say that 72% think that we play too much cricket and the current schedule is not conducive to high performance is stats that we have to listen to, really. So that's why we've gone through this process. Fair play to the ECB. They've put a hell of a lot of work into this. It's been led by Mark McCafferty, who's, I think everyone has worked incredibly hard. But in the end, it's sort of come to nothing. And although the T20 has changed a little bit, we've lost 2 games in there, which I think the T20 competition next year does look better. How it's sort of condensed a little bit more, and finals day is added on to the T20 block. We're sticking with 14 county championship games, which is disheartening, really, because the players have been pretty clear with how they feel.
So is it the turnaround times in particular? Because as you say, a small reduction has been agreed for the Blast next year, and also there's going to be a change in terms of the regionalisation of it. So in theory, some of the massive away trips, so for example, Northants won't be going to Durham, that sort of thing, that's not going to happen next year. But with the Championship specifically, is it having that massive block of games in April where you have lots of 3-day turnarounds?
Yeah, I mean, it's the back-to-back games. And I'll be honest, the iteration of the schedule I've seen for next year now, the April schedule actually doesn't look too bad. There is, I think, 6 games in 7 weeks, so every team has a bye week, and between every game, there's 3 days off. It's the September period after the 100 that looks carnage, to be honest. There are 6 games in 6 weeks, and also a period of 2 games in 9 days. So 8 days cricket in 9 days, where you basically have 1 day off at the back end of the season. That's the tough period, and that's where long journeys, people drive in late at night, injuries to fast bowlers, like I've already said. That's where that's going to be that point. And the last iteration we saw of the schedule that was proposed, the 13-game schedule, it was only 2 days less cricket. We lost 1 4-day game in that period, but they were going to add 2 50-over games. So it was only 2 days less cricket, but it just created breathing room. It meant that between every 4-day game next year, there would have been 3 days off, which is a lot better, in my opinion, for high performance.
Just trying to understand exactly what it is that players have an issue with in terms of the turnaround times, for example. I'm just imagining, like, from a bowler's point of view, is it fear of injury and players just thinking about their long-term futures, right? If you pick up an injury, you could be in your last year of a contract. That could be a massive deal and change the fortunes of your career.
It's also just the work you can put out there. So let's talk about that little period I just mentioned next year. 8 games, 8 days of cricket in 9 days. We all know how cricket works. It's easy to conceive that I might be bowling that last day of that first game and bowl 20 overs, and they do stats on us. We have these GPS units. I could easily run 30 kilometres on that last day. If we then lose the toss on the second game and go straight into the field, you'll just be shattered. And I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying it hasn't happened before. I'm just saying that the product that people are then watching and the performance I would be putting out and my risk of injury and my fatigue just go through the roof. And I just, you're not seeing the best version of me. And let's face it, I'm a county championship plodder. I'm going to just donk it on a length. But people like Josh Tong, Dylan Pennant, we want to see those guys at their absolute best. You don't want to see people playing at 60, 70%, do you? We want to put the best product out there we possibly can, as well as them not getting injured and not being at risk of mental fatigue or physical fatigue. That's what we want.
What was the reaction of the players when the news was confirmed? I understand there's a big WhatsApp group where people weren't happy.
Yeah, just that. Pretty disheartened, pretty disappointed. A lot of work has gone into this. The players have been willing to compromise throughout. We've had various options of schedules. I think we had 12-game options, 13-game options, and the players have been willing to shift throughout. These various options of the schedule have changed a lot. There's been, probably 30 iterations of next year's schedule. And the players have been willing to change throughout, but in the end, pretty disheartened that there's been very, very little change. Albeit, I do think the T20 next year looks better. There are 2 less games, and it's in a lot tighter block with finals day finished at the end of that second block, which I think is good. But in the end, after a lot of hard work, nothing's changed really, which is disheartening.
You talked in this statement earlier in the week about there being minimum standards to look after players through a summer. What are they? Is there a world in which you guys actually might be supportive of a 14-game season if certain rest periods were guaranteed?
Yeah, like I said, 3 days between county championship matches, at least a day between T20s, and 2 days between 50 over games. That's an absolute ideal world. Don't get me wrong, I totally understand how some days and some games that might not be entirely possible. But as I mentioned earlier, just 2 days less cricket in the option that would have been voted on for next year meant that every county championship game had 3 days between it, which would have been fantastic, which would have made a real difference. And as I mentioned, it's those pinch points of playing back-to-back really tight games, long journeys in between those games that really take their toll.
So just to push you on that, so there is a world in which 14 games would be fine if there were 3-day gaps between each fixture.
I think so. I mean, the players have been pretty clear that I think 13 games was always preferable. But if there's a way in which the room can be made, and like I said, rest days between, I think it's something that we'd have to vote on again. Like I said, the voting that we did was always on reducing the amount of cricket and going to 13 games. So if the ECB put a schedule out there where 14 games are still in the mix, but there are more rest days in between, it's something that we would have to vote on, yes. But, I think it would help with those pinch points. How that would happen, I'm not sure. Would that mean we play into October or start in the middle of March? I'm not too sure. But, if we can find more rest days between those fixtures, it would help, I think.
You've been around the professional game for quite a long time, and there'll be people listening to this thinking, well, hang on, if you go back to 2015, 2016, the championship game was 16 games long, the Blast was 14 games long, and the One Day Cup was exactly the same length. Obviously, the big change in that time is 100, but I'm just wondering from the perspective of a county cricketer, what has changed between 2015, 2016 to the present day? Or is it actually that as a collective, county cricketers have just been better at finding a collective voice to, I guess, stand up for yourselves and voice what you guys want?
A bit of both, I think. I mean, some of the stories from back in the day, and when they used to have a 1-day fixture in the middle of a 4-day fixture, and that was 120 miles away. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's no doubt about it. We now have 4 competitions. The 100 is sort of rammed into the middle of the summer. But we can't argue with what a success the 100 has been, and the money that's bringing to the game, what it's done for the women's game, how that is helped county cricket, and hopefully there's money coming into county cricket that will be supported. County cricket will hopefully be looked after now for the next 20 years. The 100's not going anywhere, so we have to live with that. But I think it's certain to say that the fact that 100 is in there does squeeze the schedule either side, and more cricket is sort of being squeezed into the schedule pre and post 100. And I think you're right as well. I think players are comfortable now saying how they feel a lot more. The PCA do a brilliant job at expressing how the players feel. And like I said about those stats earlier, it's clear that players feel concerned about the current schedule.
There is still a difference of opinion among the playing group. Surrey, for example, their chair, Ollie Slipper, did an interview recently where he claimed that all 31 Surrey players are pro a 14-game season. Why do you think there is that difference in opinion?
Listen, like I mentioned earlier, 72% are worried about the schedule not being conducive to high performance. That means what? 28% means that they're happy with it. That's fine. We're perfectly aware that there are various opinions out there. I read the articles released by Rory Burns, and I thought it was well written and a perfectly good argument. And if his changing room are happy with the schedule the way it is, that's absolutely fine. But certainly from my point of view as chair, I have to go with the majority. And as I've mentioned with the stats I've said, the majority of players are worried about the current schedule, and they're physical and mental health.
As a players' union, are you at all concerned about the potential that if there is a smaller number of fixtures in a county season, that you may down the line have slightly smaller sets of playing staff and also a reduction in pay if cricketers are playing less cricket?
I don't think so. Certainly, some of the minimum standards that we have in. I mean, we're in discussion with the ECB currently about the county partnership agreement for next year, and the agreements we have in place about the salary collar and the salary cap. I don't think so. We also the Futures Fund, which is an absolutely brilliant. Brilliant vehicle for helping people when they leave the game, is also up for negotiation. So it's something we're working hard on at the moment, and is a real vehicle that, all this money being introduced into the game from the 100, that's the one vehicle that we have, the Futures Fund, that sort of every county cricketer, whether you're a young 18-year-old or a 38-year-old who's played for 20 years, you can hopefully really benefit from this investment coming into the game.
Ollie, we've been talking exclusively about men's cricket, and part of the argument against a reduction in the number of county championship games is that members are getting less cricket for their membership. But that isn't taking into consideration a massive change in the domestic game, and that's the combination of men's and women's cricket, one club, two teams, and all that. Members are actually getting loads of women's cricket that they didn't before as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm obviously sat here with my PCA top on, but I've got a Warwickshire hat on exclusively as well, and I can talk about at Edgbaston. In anyone's county championship membership, they now get 14 days included in that, which is the women's game, T20 and 50 over cricket, which is absolutely brilliant. That that didn't exist 5-6 years ago in your county championship in your county membership. So although there's no doubt about it, as a male point of view, we're asking for a reduction, and as I've mentioned, that was only going to be 2 days. But no one's really talking about how there are 14 days of women's cricket there. And I think we've all seen, in the 100 and just women's cricket in general, it's only getting better and better. The standard is only getting better and better. Those players playing at Edgbaston and big grounds like that, it's only going to improve that standard. And I think sort of people should realise that the female product out there is fantastic to watch, and is only going to get better. So that's sort of included in your county membership as well. And I think people might forget that at times.
And finally, there were headlines yesterday that the possibility of a player's strike hasn't 100% been ruled out. Do you think it would ever come down to that?
I don't know. We're a union at the end of the day. Going on strike is always on the table about any issue. About if people aren't happy with the lunches at Edgbaston, they're more than happy to go on strike for it, or more than welcome to go on strike for it. Actually going on strike is quite complicated. It'd take a hell of a lot of work, but the players are really passionate about this schedule. And like you mentioned, the WhatsApp group was certainly pretty vocal on the night that the voting got announced. The players are disheartened. We're hoping it won't come to the strike. We're hoping it we'll be able to settle it before then. But yes, of course, we're a union, and going on strike is always an option.
Well, Ollie, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck.
No problem. Thanks so much.
Lawrence, could we see strike action next year? And if we do, how would you like strike action to manifest itself? What would your preferred form of protest be?
Oh, crikey. I don't think we will see strike action because...
It's not very cricket, is it?
It's not very cricket. English cricket is still pretty conservative. It's not a rebellious world. They're not going to strike over the fact that they're playing one more championship game than they ideally wanted to. Now, whether they should strike or not is another matter. Their point, I suppose, is... there are a few issues, aren't there? There's fast bowlers' fitness, essentially. There's fast bowlers' recovery. So do the members want to see fast bowlers operating at their best, which in county cricket is low 80 miles an hour generally? Or are they happy to see them go mid to late 70s towards the back end of the season? Now, I would say that for playing one game fewer, that's a price worth paying. If you remember, you get to see arguably better quality of cricket. There's the mental health issue that Ollie talks about in his interview with you. There is and I don't want to sound too dramatic here, but there is the blood on their hands issue, which is if someone crashes their car driving home late at night because they have to get to a game in 36 hours' time, whose fault is that going to be? The PCA have flagged this up last year. They got Joe Root, they were taking it so seriously, got Joe Root on board as a spokesman for that matter. And that is a serious issue. And as Ollie says, next summer in September, they're playing 8 days out of 9 because they're having to squeeze the schedule as usual. So I do sympathise with them. What's interesting, I think, is there's this disconnect between the players and the members. Fundamentally, the members want to see as much cricket as possible, and the players are going, we can't do this. Just listen to what we're saying. So they're heading for. I don't think we're heading for strike action because I just don't think how's that going to work? That's going to mess up the schedule even more. It would compromise the entire season. A team could win the championship with having played 12 games or 11, and that's precisely the scenario that no one wants. But the members have to listen a bit more. And the members who've won this argument in the end, effectively, because the county chairman, chief executive are having to listen to them.
Phil, how do you see it?
Well, I think that's summed up perfectly, really. I don't have that much more to add. I think the point that Ollie makes regarding the extra days of cricket that you can attend for your membership, there's 14 home days of cricket with the women's teams now being aligned, of course, to the men's. 2 teams, 1 club, as you said in your interview. I think that has to be factored in as well. And yeah, as Lawrence says, the reality is that 60,000 members, perhaps slightly fewer than that now, across the 18 clubs have won this scrap, really. And I think Surrey's role is interesting in this. And again, you referenced it, the Ollie Slipper interview, which we actually saw when it first came out. And it was quite punchy on his part and quite bullish. And he made a clear point that the whole club is aligned, and the membership and the staff and the players and the coaches are all entirely aligned. Their playing staff is 30 plus.
31, yeah.
31.
And 31 of them voted in favour of the 14-game season.
Yeah, which is interesting because it clearly runs counter to the prevailing mood. And I wonder how much power that actually had when it came to finally making this decision to keep the status quo as it is.
I think an issue, by the way, was the alternative was not very good.
The alternative seemed a bit garbled, and again, you needed to really dig into it to try and understand. But I remember sitting with you, Lawrence, years ago, actually, at a lunch, and the more things change, the more things stay the same, right? I remember saying, so what's going to happen with the schedule, Lawrence? And you said, well, we have to work with essentially a conference system. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you were talking about 3 groups of 6 at that time. And this was probably 7, 8, 9 years ago. I thought that this was perhaps the moment where we could come up with a pretty coherent version of that. Personally, I like the idea of a big playoff final, and I know that's not especially popular, and I can understand the counter arguments to that, but I'm quite interested in that as a flagship final, like a 5-day game in September to see it all out. But anyway, whether it is that or not, it seemed like the conversation never quite got off the ground, and yet it felt like now could have been the time to properly have it, to have a grown-up conversation about it.
I think there's a sort of fear of the conference system here, like it's too American somehow, or something like that. I mean, but
you are broadly an advocate of it, right?
Well, yes, I was, because I could see that it made the season leaner and more meaningful, and with a team going up and down from each of the divisions of 6, no game would be dead, probably. And clearly, I mean, one of the issues with the conference system as it's proposed this time was you'd have 2 top divisions of 6 and then a bottom tier of 6, and the 6 there were worried about being cut adrift. It's like when Test cricket has discussed 2 divisions, and the likes of West Indies and Sri Lanka say, yeah, but we'll never get promoted. Cricket will die in our country. That's one of the issues. The smaller teams don't want to be left behind.
But then 33% would be promoted, right?
Or 1 or 16%, whatever, 1 out of 6, however you decide it. But of course, then you're looking at arguably 10 games a season, unless you have. That's how I was thinking about it. You have 5 home and away against each of the teams in your conference, and then you have time for rest and rotation and fast bowlers going for it. And okay, I get the argument that if it rains for a couple of rounds, you're down to 8 games, and that's 4 home games a season. Of course, the members were never going to have that. But we're not. English county cricket has always been beholden, has been held back by the fact that there are 18 businesses, each with a different agenda and each with their own concerns. And we're never going to make progress in the way that the progressives want. We have to accept If we started county cricket again from scratch, we'd probably have 12 teams, maybe 15, 16. We would not have 18. And that's always been the problem. That always will be the problem.
I think for me, part of the issue is actually how good Division 1 has been recently. It's felt really competitive. And
I understand that.
Any alternative would be, at some level, damaging the quality. If you had two adjacent Division 1s, you would have really good teams not playing each other. And I think that's actually one of the faults of the current system, in that we've said it in previous seasons, quite often the best teams aren't playing each other home and away. It's a bit lopsided. Some teams don't get to play the teams at the bottom of the table twice, which is an unfair advantage as well. So I'm not saying the current system is perfect, but I can see why quite a few counties who are doing quite well at the moment actually look at it and be like, this is quite a good product as well, and probably the most engaged county championship there's been for quite a long time.
But a number of counties, even in that top division, have come out and said, we advocate for a change in the domestic structure. So even though they are contributing to what is a pretty good, watchable and broadly level playing field, broadly, in that, as you say, Durham got relegated and beat the champions, nonetheless, a lot of these teams in that league are still saying, well, we advocate for change. Durham did, Somerset did, etc., etc.
Lawrence, your county championship team of the season.
Shall I just go through it quickly? No justification. Okay.
Go through the whole thing.
Hamid Sibley, Rayhan Ahmed at 3.
Nice.
Who's my only Division 2 player, by the way. James Rue. Dan Lawrence. I will justify him if you need me to at some point. Lyndon James at 6 as the all-rounder. John Simpson keeping wicket. George Hill, Tom Taylor, Kyle Abbott and Jack Leach as the frontline spinner.
Nice. That's fairly similar to mine. Phil, do you want to go?
Hasib, Saif Zaib, top run scorer in the whole of the country. Rayan at 3. God, you can't turn away from 500s in 10 games. James Coles at 4. Charlie Allison, my new favourite pet project, at 5. Brilliant young Essex kid. Kellaway, Glamorgan's Kellaway, brilliant all-rounder, at 6. John Simpson at 7, keeping as with Lawrence. George Hill as well at 8, brilliant seamer, medium-fast seamer. Josh Tongue, player of the year, really. Tom Taylor I've not just gone on the stats with Tom Taylor, he's in there as well. I watched him earlier in the season, especially against left-handers. He's big, he just cuts it away. He's almost unhittable on his day. He's a brilliant seam bowler. Worcester will do well to keep hold of him, I fear. And Jack Leach as well has had a really good year up on the rails. So there's my 11.
So mine's slightly different. So I've got Hamid opening, but with Big Tall Paul opening up top with him.
Nice.
So 300s, average 50, wax it. And Essex were properly in the doldrums before Walter went up to the top of the order a few weeks in this season. Got a massive 100 this week against Somerset in their win there. We saw him at the Oval in the season. He looked amazing. I'd wonder if he's actually one of the hiding in plain sight, really good players who no one really talks about. He's got this amazing first-class record. I know he gets his BBL deals and he has this weird all-rounder role in T20 cricket, but he averages 40 in first-class cricket, exclusively in Division 1, and Chelmsford's not always been the easiest place to bat.
Yeah, well, after a tough year for Essex, they have actually stumbled out of it in mid-table, but with a much clearer idea of their team going into next year.
And then Marcus Harris at 3, so he averaged 60 for Lancs, and when they were really struggling, he was the only guy who really stood up for them. James Coles, not just for the runs, but the wickets as well, 20 wickets at 33, bowling more and more for Sussex. Just 21 years old, first year in Div 1. I think that's a massive tick. Slight asterisk against his runs in that loads and loads of his runs were in the Kookaburra games. So I think only one of his 400s were in the Duke's round, but for a guy that young, he's got an SA20 deal as well, at a decent-ish 100, breakout year in the Blast. I think
he had a very
really
good Blast. Yeah, I just think he's a really good all-round cricketer. And if you're doing an uncapped 11,
he's in it.
He's definitely in it.
Yeah.
And I think he will bother the top brass before too long.
Saif Zaib, 600s and 750s for Northants, who finished second last in Div 2. You didn't pick him?
No, well, Division 2, you see, I do think you have to factor that in. It was easier to be No, look, he's done brilliantly, by the way, and I'm worried he's going to get snapped up by a bigger county
That's
before
why
long.
you haven't picked him.
I don't want to draw too much attention to him.
Yeah, all 18 directors of cricket listen to this very closely, by the way.
The scoring runs in Division 2 was a bit easier this year than Division 1. If you look, so one of the guys who almost got in for me was Lewis Rees at Derbyshire, who took 50 wickets at 19 in Division 2.
And it's 600 plus runs.
Yeah, and it came pretty close. So Saif Saib is a great talent, and it's a great story. Darren Lehman has turned him round there from a perennial underachiever into a guy who's now in 2 of our 3 county 11s and probably should be in a 3rd, but I didn't want to be accused of bias.
So he was a prodigy, right? Like a teenage star who lost his way.
He lost his way. He didn't quite do it under John Sadler, the previous coach. He had his career average languishing in the late 20s. You watched him in this white ball cricket. You'd think, wow, this guy's got something. A brilliant fielder as well. And then he'd get out for 26, 37 in red ball cricket, and he was like, oh, this is so frustrating. This season, Lehman just got hold of him and has turned him into the next guy who's going to leave Northants, basically, for a richer club.
John Simpson, 400 in Sussex's Div 1 return. Lyndon James, we talked about him last week, but averaged nearly 50 with the bat and crucial wickets. Mentioned he wears number 8 because Stuart Broad handed that number down to him, and he's got Broad's spot in the dressing room that was given to him by Paul Franks back in the day. George Hill, standout seamer in Division 1, 51 wickets at 16. Josh Tongue, 31 wickets at 22 from his 6 games. Leach, 52 wickets at 23. And Tom Taylor, leading wicket taker in Division 1. Next up, probably lower down the running order than he should be, Joe Root. So I caught up with him at a skills and leadership event for secondary school kids in Leeds. The day was run by Chance to Shine and RBC Wealth Management. The girls took part in leadership activities put on by Chance to Shine, RBC's volunteers, and Root himself. After Root was done imparting his wisdom with the kids, he sat down with me to chat the Ashes, technique, and how Brendon McCullum has changed how Root himself views batting.
Before we get to it, is that the first time you've interviewed him face to face?
Yes.
Where was your experience?
He was really nice. So he came up to me before and just said, "Hey, how you doing?" And we've never actually
Love the show.
met.
Did he say
he didn't say that, but it's one of those where
he's heard of the show.
Well, he didn't say that either. But it's one of those where I would definitely remember if we met before. And I in my head was like, we definitely haven't met properly before, like been in press conference or whatever. And then when I was fiddling with the microphones before we got going, we had a bit of Sheffield United chat. So one of my best mates is a Blades fan, so I actually go to quite a lot of Sheffield United games. So we had a bit of chat around how it's all gone downhill since they lost in Dye, that sort of thing.
Good stuff. He didn't ask after me, did he?
He did not know.
No.
Were you genuinely expecting him to?
Obviously not.
Well, here is that chat with Joe. As you can probably hear in the background, something a little bit different for the next bit of the podcast. I'm joined by Joe Root. We're in Leeds, where Chance to Shine and their partners, RBC Wealth Management, are putting on a skills and leadership day for some kids here in Leeds. Joe Root, alongside me, has been leading it. And what pearls of leadership wisdom have you been sharing with the kids?
Well, I've actually been learning from them, to be honest. It's been a really good day, actually, trying to use cricket and see that within the sport you can bring out so much more from it, and not just the raw skills that you gain from it, but as mentioned, like leadership qualities you can gain working with each other, understanding what your strengths are, what you bring to the table and to the group, and how you can use that as a collective to create something quite powerful. More than anything, is just trying to really fill the girls with confidence, let them understand what their best strengths are, and then bring them out to the fore. And not only will that help improve their cricket and working together within a cricket environment, but also from a number of different aspects of life as well.
Not long until you fly out to Australia. It's your 4th tour of Australia. How are you feeling 2 months out for the first Test match?
Very excited, to be honest. It's obviously been a really a sort of a high octane summer with the cricket that we've had, and obviously the previous Test series against India was very good to play, and I'm sure it was great to watch as well. So, and I think it's been in many ways, not that it's an exercise in any way. That is a huge Test series, but for us as a group to experience that ahead of an Ashes series going to Australia was brilliant, and great in many ways, getting us ready for all the challenges that a series like that will pose.
How is Test cricket different in Australia to the rest of the world? Just with Butch was talking about it the other day, and he says that sometimes people just forget it's really hot.
It is hot, but so is a lot of other places. Some of the hottest places playing in Dubai and Abu Dhabi in September is pretty grueling. Of course, like everywhere has its home advantage. Is not just the surface; it can be everything else that comes with it: the conditions, the weather, the heat, the humidity, a number of different aspects. But I also think within Australia, the climate's very different in Brisbane as to what it is in Perth, as to what it could be in Melbourne. So you have to be able to adapt to all of those things, right? And they're one of the challenges that we've had. But I think we go there this year with a completely different outlook on our squad, right? We look, and this team, we can hit them with different things that we didn't have the previous 3 tours. We've obviously got a lot more pace and a barrage of it, not just one bowler. We're looking at maybe having 2 or 3 bowlers that can bowl at 90 mile an hour all day. We obviously playing a very different style of cricket to the last time we toured there. And we've got a lot more consistency within our batting lineup. So it's a really exciting time for the group. I feel like it's a great time for us to take Australia on in those conditions, and who clearly are very good in their own conditions and have got a great record, obviously, especially against us, but a very difficult team to beat at home. So that being said, I'm very confident. I'm very excited for it. It is a great tour. It's a beautiful country to go and visit. And you're playing against the whole country. You're not just playing against 11 Australians. You're playing against a very proud nation. So, it's something that you clearly always look forward to, and one now with the experience that I have, the I guess not being captain this time round as well, I can really look to enjoy and focus in on giving everything I can as a senior player and as hopefully a run scorer within that team.
Just in terms of your technique, do you do anything differently when you're out in Australia with slightly different conditions to England, let's say?
I think have to cover different aspects and modes of dismissal. You want to maybe protect certain elements of it. Again, you look at the last tour and the wickets that we played on, they were different to the tour last time. So there'll be a lot of it will have to be done out there. But clearly, there's obviously more bounce to contend with. The pace of the wickets, there's obviously more to work with there, and the bowlers will use that to their advantage in different ways as well. So it's just making sure that you're really clear about how you're going to score your runs, how you can feel comfortable within your defence as well, and make it as hard as possible for them to get you out by still maximising your scoring opportunity.
Our listeners love technique chat, and I've got a little slideshow for you. So it's your technique, your setup at 4-year intervals from 2013 to now. Are you someone who makes deliberate technical tweaks, or are the evolutions gradual things? So if you're comparing 2021 to 2025, not loads difference, but you'd probably say in 2025 you're a bit more side on, your foot's pointing a bit more to cover than extra cover. Are those things that you actively think on and you decide, I want to do this, or is it something that gradually happens over time?
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at the very start of that in 2013, my trigger was a lot more static. It was like bang, bang, and then I'd be quite stationary and I'd move from there. Whereas now it's a lot more, try and get a bit more rhythm through it. So I also think that if you have the same technique throughout a phase of 4 to 6 years, teams will work you out. Teams will find a mode of dismissal, which there is like a consistent way of getting out at certain points in your innings, and they'll target that and they'll, make it very difficult for you, and it could become a thing. So I think more than anything, you're just trying to stay one step ahead of the opposition, one step. If there are ways that you might go out 3 or 4 times batting a certain way, you might go, okay, against this bowler type, I'm going to do something slightly different. It might be where you stand. It might be a trigger. It might be how you line yourself up. A lot of guys now bowl wider of the crease, so being able to manage that angle and understand the threat that will give, but also the advantages you can gain from it and the scoring opportunities can come from it. So I think more than anything, it's not necessarily about having one specific technique and trying to make that as good as it is all the time. It's about how do you manage the different scenarios, the different intricacies within the game. It might be that I set up differently to Bumrah, to Siraj, for example, this summer, just because of where they are on the crease, the different skills. Siraj is bowling more wobble seam, Bumrah's trying to swing the ball. You might need different things to combat that. So at the start of my career, I was very much, this is my technique, this is what served me well, and I've got to just make sure that that's as good as it can be, and it'll stand up well against everything. Whereas now it's a bit more, this is what I know will work against this bowler type. This is what will work, and I might change things within game a little bit more. But that comes from experience, understanding what's worked previously, what I've got right, what I've got wrong, and yeah, having the confidence to do that as well within game.
Was there a moment when you realised that actually the one technique for all conditions thing is not the way to go? Was there one moment or one series, one bowler that made you realise that?
You know what, that's probably only changed since Brendon's come in as coach, and he, not deliberately, but the way that he looks at the game is it's more tactically than technically, and it's about managing what's right in front of you and understanding, and that's really resonated well with me. I feel like for a long time I was always obsessed with how I was lining things up and where my feet were, and that would be sort of my safe places. If that felt good, and in practice of leading in, that was all right, then I felt in a good place going into. Whereas now, I'm not as reliant on that. I feel like it's about managing the game better.
And do you do that with conversations with Brendon and other guys on the team?
Small things, like if I was struggling with a bowler at one stage, I remember having a conversation with him, just sort of saying, finding him quite tricky. It's like, yeah, but he's the most consistent bowler the opposition have. You know where it's going to be. Why not just change where you stand? Yeah. And little things like that, I think, why haven't I thought of that? It's just the most basic thing ever, but you're so used to doing things a certain way, and you get so wrapped up in your own game sometimes you don't see the rest of it and what other areas can really help you, and can make it more difficult for the opposition as well.
What gets you out of bed in the morning and put so much energy into your cricket? You turned 35 during the Ashes, and if you look at the recent-ish history of English cricket, not many batters have played beyond 35. Nasser was the last guy to score 100 age 36, for example. What is it that still drives you and motivates you to constantly work in your game and to be the best batter that you are?
I think being part of this team is really fun. For one thing, like we play a really exciting way, and it's a great group to play with. It's a group of friends as well as teammates, but I like the challenge of waking up and having to constantly feel like you've got to get better and find different ways in which you can improve your game, and try and improve the guys around you as well, whether that's through conversations, whether that's working together in the nets, sharing ideas, stuff like that. It all fascinates me, and it's all things that make, like I say, when I lose that excitement of turning up to training and wanting to improve, I think that's probably going to be the time to stop. But yeah, I'd still get that buzz from that, which, you know, when you go into those games and those big moments, that again, that sort of that feeling of being involved in big series like this one, another good drivers to keep going.
You mentioned the fun. Obviously, there's some people online just think you guys just love playing golf and all that sort of thing. But I find it really interesting that when you talk to players in the dressing room, they not just talk about it being a fun environment and talk about how it's a really close environment. They link that with, I guess, how it affects the cricket and that being a better environment to play cricket. Can you explain that? What is it about being in a more fun environment? Like, why does having a good time with the guys around you make a difference on the pitch or within a game?
I feel like if you're in I think it's quite kind of disrespectful to say that that's all we do. We work really hard, actually. We train really hard when we're on, and we're preparing for games. We know exactly what we want to get from it, and we work tirelessly to make sure that we're in a really good place to attack each test match. When you're creating an environment where you want guys to thrive and feel confident, you need to be relaxed, right? And you want people to feel like they can be themselves. And normally you have those important, in-depth, honest conversations in that sort of moment and in those kind of environments. I think that's something that Brendon and Ben have created really well over a period of time, where guys can feel like they can, share different ideas and bring things to the fore and help each other. It doesn't always have to be in a net environment or at a cricket ground. It can be in a more relaxed setting. So I think it's actually helped us in a number of ways on the field from doing stuff like that away from it.
Joe, thank you so much for your time and best of luck over the winter.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Lawrence, you literally wrote the book on Bazball. Do you think that McCullum is sometimes slightly unfairly characterised as a bit of a vibes man? Root says that McCullum has had a profound effect on how he views batting, and it's borne out in the numbers too. Root averages 58 from the 41 test matches that McCullum has presided over.
Yeah, Root's an interesting one in the Bazball setup, because if Bazball's all about getting the best version of yourself out there. That's kind of, sound like an American self-help manual there for a second, but that is essentially what they're doing. And the best version of Root turns out to be pretty well the version of Root before Bazball. He went through this period where he felt like he owed Ben Stokes something, so he had to buy into the reverse scoops and the ramps. And of course, he gets out to Jasprit Bumrah in India, and English cricket jumps all over him to a ridiculous degree. Even though that shot had been extremely profitable for him, he'd used it well in the previous Ashes. It'd been one of the signature shots against New Zealand in the first summer of Bazball, famously of Tim Southey at Trent Bridge. So it's a bit like Harry Brooks sort of advance at the seamers and he cracks it over extra cover. Of course, that's now a terrible shot because he got out to it at the Oval. English cricket overreacts to these things. But since that moment, since that India moment, Root has, I should have checked the stats really, but his average must be something like 65 to 70 with a ridiculous amount of hundreds. So he has gone back to being the player the best player he can possibly be. And McCullum has probably only needed to nudge him in that direction. I mean, McCullum, when he took over the Test team, of course, famously said that he's a better coach turning a bad team into a good one than he is an already good team into a great one, which is why he took the red ball team and not the white ball team. And he's discovered with the white ball team that perhaps he's got his work cut out because he can't sort of divide his attention as well as he'd like to. I think with Root, he just has had to let him get on with it. Though I appreciate he's had this discussion with him about, what to do against accurate bowlers. And that's probably where the scoop came from in the first place. But no, the best version of Joe Root is the Joe Root that's always scored shed loads of runs for England. McCullum hasn't had to do much. But
he would say that he's more proactive and he almost went too far one way up until the point where he gets out playing that scoop shot. So
does he acknowledge that then?
Not in that interview, to be fair, but he is more proactive. He's not now the same batter he was before McCullum took charge. And I think it's a really cool marrying of Root's obsession over technique and being open-minded enough to take in McCullum's, I suppose, tactical and philosophical view of how you take the attack to the opposition. And he's got the ability to manage it. And I don't know, I think it's quite interesting in reference to our earlier conversation about Peter Moores. And actually, there is still room for being a bit more hands-on with the player. And if Joe Root is saying that he's benefited from fairly hands-on tactical advice from his coach, you do wonder, actually, is there a room for a more Duncan Fletcher style coach that you talked about earlier on? I don't know.
His evolution routes is remarkable, really. And much of it actually goes back to that period, that COVID period, when he'd obviously been on the carousel for a decade and more. He was England captain. It was a pretty nightmarish time, obviously. And he used that period to disassemble his game and famously spoke to NASA to try and get some tapes from Sky and studied them. For the first time, he actually had a breather. I can't remember the word he used, but it's essentially like a kind of a recalibration or a restart. And since then, obviously, he's been untouchable. He's been the most prolific batter in the world. This winter looms so large, doesn't it, Lawrence? We look at it from our point of view and we think he's untouchable. But what do you think the world looks at when they look at Joe Root if this winter doesn't bring him the 100 that we all crave?
It will still be held against him in some quarters. You already saw the chat after the 2-2 draw with India. A lot of Indian fans are piling in, but he's not done it in Australia, as if they really cared about that. Ricky Ponting didn't do it in India. That didn't mean he was a great player. Indeed. I mean, Don Bradman only averaged 56 in body line. I mean, and Root's record in Australia isn't terrible. It's an average of 35 with 9 50s. So he's always been on the cusp of doing it. If he doesn't, it will be painful for him if he doesn't get over the line this winter. This is probably his last chance. If he doesn't get over the line and England lose, that will be a tiny bit of an asterisk next to him, but not so big that it should question the rest of it. He is still a GOAT.
Yeah.
It still sounds silly. Doesn't it?
It does. I can't believe I've never used that phrase.
No.
I didn't expect you to.
I didn't
say
see
that.
it coming. Have to say,
But
Lawrence.
I think in the same way
Got to
that
evolve, haven't you?
This is it. You've got to play a few shots these days.
I think in the same way that I was unprepared for you to say those words exactly. I think English cricket more broadly is just unprepared for the prospect of having a batter this good that is in the conversation with the genuine all-time greats. English cricket hasn't produced batters on that level who are in the same conversation as someone like Ponting for a very long time. So I think English fans, I think a lot of England fans almost want Root to score 100 more than anything else this winter. It'd be amazing if Root just gets it done in the first Test match, first day of the series, on my birthday as well. Get it sorted and move on.
He got 100 on my wedding day, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
What a guy.
My biggest memory from Phil's wedding is Phil just checking every 20 minutes, even though he had a phone himself, asking other people what is Root on. Anyway, moving on. At Dineticq, they're taking elite biomechanics out of the lab and into the nets. Paceflow gives bowlers and coaches clear, camera-based insights built on 2 decades of Loughborough research, and it's already being used across counties, academies, and other professional setups. Now they're opening the doors wider to the cricket community. Try Paceflow at your club and experience how science can transform performance. To learn more, head to their website, www.dineticq.com. Moments of the summer.
Oh.
Whilst Phil tries to think of his, Lawrence.
Well, without wanting to steal all of Phil's ideas, I've got a couple of runners up, and then I'll hit you with my winner. So, my runners up are Josh Tongue takes the winning wicket for Notts against Surrey in a game that everyone was watching and was clearly going to decide the destination of the championship title. Ravi Bopara scoring.
You were going to say that.
You knew, and we were both there that night.
That's not fair, because you knew I was going to pick that one out.
And
you did recesses of.
You did a great interview with him, in fairness. But Ravi Bopara's match-winning 100 for Northampton against Surrey in the Blast quarter-final. My moment of the summer is quite a poignant county moment, actually. Worcestershire winning the Metro Bank one-day trophy, beating Hampshire in the final, and the players take the trophy over to the parents of Josh Baker, who obviously died last year in very sad circumstances. And it just made me think about the club nature and the feeling that is engendered by county cricket and county clubs. It's not just about the headlines and the money and the replica shirts the hundreds are selling and the auction money they're getting in and how that's going to change English cricket. It's about these sort of families, isn't it? These families dotted around and I don't mean Josh Baker's family, I'm talking about county cricket families. And it meant a lot to them. And also Worcestershire being one of the smaller counties, everything about it was, I can't believe there would have been a dry eye in the house at Trent Bridge that day.
Phil.
A couple from domestic cricket, one, and don't at me and all the rest of it. The game that I probably enjoyed the most was the Trent Rockets Oval Invincibles game at the Oval when Jordan Cox smashed one of the knocks of the season, like 80 odd and 30 odd balls or something mad like that. And it was, we had a box for it, I think. We had a few people in for that game, and Joe Root opens the batting, Rayan Ahmed bats 3. Good cricketers on both sides. It was a packed house. It was a lovely evening. And the game itself was unequivocally gripping. And that sticks in the mind. The emergence of Charlie Allison, who is a player that I can't be more excited about.
What's the lineage of Essex middle order batters that you love? So does it go directly from Bopara, Wesley, Lawrence, Allison? Have I missed anyone? Is there anyone
NASA started it. NASA batted 4.
Yeah.
And Mark Waugh batted 3 or 4. In fact, NASA batted 5. And Salim Malik came in after Mark Waugh and he batted 4 or 5, and NASA was either side. And so it all really began then.
There's a book in this for some people.
Yeah, sure. Certainly a podcast series. Anyway, if anyone wants to pay for it. But anyway, Charlie Allison forget the Essex, forget the myopia of my allegiances for a minute. He's a young kid, so straight away it's the excitement, the shock of the new, and no one had him down to play much first class cricket this year. Dean Elgar, the opening bat, was on paternity leave. They needed an opening batsman, so they plucked him from the stiffs, basically. I think he's 20-year-old. And they opened up with him in early April, and he didn't get many runs, but he played kind of quite solidly for 20s and 30s and the odd naught and whatnot, opening the batting. Anyway, it was a bit of a struggle for him initially, as you'd expect. I didn't really pay much more attention to it. Anyway, they went, and then he left a straight one off his brother, Ben Allison, who went to Worcester, the week before the game at the Oval. And the Oval game is always the big one for Essex. And they turned up there, and he got a duck in the following innings. So I think it was then back-to-back ducks. And he's got a highest first-class score of 30-something. And Essex are behind in the game. And it's a huge game for them because they started to struggle. And he went out in the second innings and he peeled off a brilliant 100. And you could just see the way it just blossomed and emerged, and how his identity really did come through across the course of that afternoon. And by the end of it, he was stepping outside leg stump and lofting them over extra cover, hit a couple of sixes. It's quite a small lad, but when he hits it, it stays hit. And since then, he's basically been unstoppable. I think he's made 4 hundreds across the formats, maybe 5.
So it's 400 across the format.
Yeah, and he made a 97, I think, in the final game, and he was all on for that 5th one. And he's just a brilliant player to watch, and obviously everyone gets excited about a kid coming through at their club. And he's one. Tom Wesley, in an interview with me last month, said, look, I don't want to put any too much pressure on the boy. I just want him to go and play, but he's a generational player. So there's that. And sorry, very briefly, my international moment was here at Lord's on that final day when 2 champions, Archer and Pant, come up together, and obviously Archer's return is a well-told story. And that delivery, to see it live, and the reaction in the normally quite somber and serious-minded, stern-faced press box on a Monday as well, when the crowd was, a real melting pot, was just a stunning bit of sporting theatre. That delivery confirmed that he was back, and it was the only way that they were going to win that game, because Pant otherwise would have just strolled to the finish line. Great moment across a pretty brilliant series.
Yeah, there's so many moments you could pick from in that series. Or the multiple war of words between the teams, both here and at Old Trafford. For me, hard to beat Lee Fortis versus Gautam Gambhir in the run-up to the Oval Test match. But I think it's tough. I thought when Root gets to his 100 at the Oval and he brings out the headband in a tribute to Thorpe, and I think Nasser was in commentary. Nasser, obviously great mates with Thorpe. It was a test match was all around Thorpe's memory, and Thorpe was also one of Root's batting mentors as well. So that moment I thought was really, really special. But for me, it's the first over Jofra Archer bowls here in that test match. It's 6 years pretty much between Archer bowling in a test match in front of a home crowd, the 5th test at the Oval in 2019, to his comeback here. Hasn't played a test match since early 2021, that weird COVID series in India. And it was the outpouring of love for him, basically, when he comes. The theatre starts with him giving his cap to the umpire, and the crowd is just so much more invested than they normally are for a moment like that. And the first ball to Jaspal's good. Second ball's proper, fizzes past the outside edge, and you're like, oh, he's back. And then the third ball, he gets him and he wheels away in celebration. And there's that outpouring and release of emotion that would have built up for years and years. It's been such a long comeback journey, so much physical and mental pain in that. So I thought that was a really special moment. And sometimes I like moments that are almost in isolation from the match itself. Obviously, it was important and he was crucial for England in that game. But that moment was almost in isolation from the game that was happening. And I thought it was quite cool to see the fans having that opportunity to show how much that Jofra means to them. But yeah, loads of moments of that series. That final day at the Oval. Wow.
Well, exactly. That was
hard
to see past that, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Woakes walking out with his shoulder. I mean, how have we not spoken about that yet? I mean, that really. And had England won, it would have gone down in history, wouldn't it? That act of bravery. And possibly the last thing he'll do on the cricket field for England.
Yeah. Let's leave it there for today. Cheers, Lawrence. Cheers, Phil. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We'll be back for the weekly show next Monday, but before then, we've got the Women's Weekly show on Wednesday and also the first Patreon World Cup Daily, England's first game in the World Cup on Friday.